All right, welcome to episode 21 of Building the Athlete. I'm your host, Scott Benson, and today we have Joe Horst on the show. Joe, welcome to the show. Glad you could be here.
Glad to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate you taking time out of your day. So, Joe, we're going to get going here right away and hop in. You and I have known each other for, I think, maybe a little bit over a year. We've done some training together. Um, Developed a relationship outside of that. I think your story is incredible. I think we're going to get into some of that today, but I think you're the definition of perseverance and not ever giving up. So I think there's a really important message there for young kids. Can you just, I guess, if we could do a quick capture of your life over the last 25 years, you know, can you kind of quickly summarize like growing up and kind of where you've been and what's brought us to this point right now?
Yeah. Like I said, my name is Joe Horst, and my life started very unfortunate because of my parents' decisions. And with that being said, as a child, my reality was really based off of like television because I was in foster cares, and then foster cares ended up to like juvenile detention centers. And so from 7 to 17 I was never out in the public, you know what I'm saying? I never went to a middle school. I've never went to a high school. um I had my first birthday when I was 8 years old. And so, with that being said, and then I got out, and I've always wanted to do the best that I could. And when you start so low, the best that I thought was for me, I got a job at Sonic, and I was so happy about that. But as I continued to see the world, I just there's always just been something in me that, just wanted more. And so with that being said, I went to from Sonic, and I went to construction. And with construction, I moved up the ladder, very quickly. And I realized that, there's kind of a pinnacle when you're working for a company. Um, and I don't like authority. I like doing things my way. I feel like I could do things. Once I learn something, I'm the type of guy, like, you teach me something, and then all right, I'm good, and I'm gonna do it better than you now, just because I'm me. Um, and so with that being said, I ended up starting my own company. And just from starting from basically nothing to having my own company, I thought it was, the pinnacle. So I kind of like let off the gas a lot. I let off the gas a lot, and I started going a different direction, and I started losing sight of my goals, and I started to lose like that fire, the things that get you up in the morning, the things that keeps you focused. And so when you're laser focused, it's a clear shot, the headshot's kill shot. But when your energy's all sorts of other ways, you might be going this way, you might be going that way. And a lot of things get misconstrued. But so with that being said, I was always in the gym. Like I said, I've always wanted to be more, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. And so I thought I wanted to be a foreman. I got to a foreman. I was like, oh man, let me be a supervisor. I got to supervisor. Oh, let me own my company. Then I owned my company, and I was like, man, is this it? You know what I'm saying? And it's with that being said, I realized like what I was searching for wasn't wasn't a title. It wasn't a position. It was searching for purpose. It was searching for truth. My truth. Because like I said, I didn't like, I was never told, like how, like with your parents, you see your parents going to school, or while you're in school, you see your parents, if they're like a teacher, or if they're a nurse or a construction worker, like you kind of can see where your future is going, of what kind of what you want to be, as you start to think what you want to be at that young of an age. But when I was at that young of an age, I just wanted to be a gang member. I just wanted to be. I was being prepped to go to prison. You know what I mean? That was my mind. I just wanted to be strong, and just so I just so I could handle myself in prison. And then once I realized, like, each year, I'm like, whoa, I didn't go to prison. I didn't go to prison. I didn't go to prison. Um, my goals just started getting, bigger and bigger and bigger.
Joe, when were your parents no longer a part of your life?
I never met my dad, and my mom was never in my life.
Okay. So like you had kind of said, kind of institutionalized from a young age. Okay. And I mean, you made a really good point that growing up, when most kids are learning by watching their parents, or even aunts, uncles, grandparents, like you never had any of that. So you've always been, I mean, you've always been on your own.
Yeah.
Uh, so when you were younger, let's just say 10, 12, 14, talk a little bit about, what was that like? What was, what did a day look like in your life?
I mean, so when I was, let's say, we'll just go 12. I was at this place called Springfield Academy, and they woke us up. Everything was structured. There was, four to a room. You showered together, you shit together, you ate together. Like a brotherhood. It's like a group of about 25 guys. You worked out together. We worked out three times a day. We fought together, but it was very, very strict. Of so in that place, it was peer ran. You know what I mean? So they had staff watching us, but then there was like you would have your group leader. So your group leaders would run the group, and so it'd be like a chain of command. And so let's say if one person wasn't listening, we would all get in trouble. You know what I'm saying? And it was a place designed for us all helping each other with our story and learning about um why we're feeling the certain way, emotions, different strategies, different coping skills. And, I just want to make this real very clear. And so for so much of my life, I use that as an excuse to not be kind of be like a street guy. I use that as an excuse. Oh, I was locked up, but this, and that. And this really goes back to mentality of if you could look at a situation always two ways, no matter what. You know what I mean? There's a negative and a good side. And if you can't see the good side, then there's something wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? I would say 99% of the situations because I was able to find good even though I had so much trauma. You know what I'm saying? I had so much trauma, but so like I being said, I was able to once I got out of that victim mentality, I was able to use a lot of those things that I was taught as a child, as an adult, and we know now as an adult, most people don't know how to talk about their feelings, especially men. Um, and most majority of people operate off of emotions, and they put their emotions thinking that they're their thoughts, and it dictates their reality when it's just a wave.
Yeah, and I think, if we're relating this, people listening, a lot of them are going to be athletes, and we talk about that victim mentality, and that's kind of like the first thing I was thinking about before even getting on this today is, I think whether we're talking about athletes or, adults living life, like you have to come at everything from that attitude of, being grateful for what you do have instead of what you don't have. And I work with so many kids that, and I probably was the same way that, I didn't appreciate what I had, what my parents were doing for me. Um, and for you, a guy that had a really, really tough upbringing to sit here and talk about finding the good in things and being grateful, I think that's amazing because it had to come from somewhere. And, for you to go through, the system, so to speak, and come up and build your own company and, become a high level fighter, like, can you kinda dig into that and, like, that had to be instilled in you at some point, or you just think you're wired that way?
My belief is we are all wired that way, but if you don't search for it, you're never going to find it. And there's several versions of us. inside one.
So I just where does that attitude
Oh
of
yeah.
being grateful come
So
from?
it's because I had to learn it because I would it was probably 4 years ago. I had an awakening, and when I say awakening, I mean I started noticing things about myself, and in order to do that, I had to take accountability. I'd just wake up angry. And I use that, like I said, I use that excuse. Oh, I was locked up. I didn't have no family, this, and that. So I'd wake up angry. And like I said, yeah, that was a version of myself, but my life, like I had so much energy and I knew that I was outperforming people and I knew that my drive was just on a whole different level than everyone around me, but it was my mindset that was holding me back. And so the renewal of the mind is we all have that voice in our head of saying, "Oh, you should do this or you shouldn't do that," of and I say this like, be careful what you want because God's going to give it to you. I wanted greatness. I've always wanted greatness. And man, careful if you want to be great. Be careful if you want to be successful because you don't want to live with regret. And that voice in your head of like, oh, you're sitting on the couch, be like, oh man, I thought you wanted to be great. Or you hear that alarm going off at 5:30 in the morning. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I thought you wanted to be great. And that's what you chase. And for me, I was super ungrateful because I was better than everybody that I surrounded myself with. You know what I'm saying? And with that, like I said, there's levels to everything. And if you don't put yourself in situations to get better, you're never going to be better. But it's easy to be, I look at it like this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 10. And then 10 is, the top, but then there's a whole nother level, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And then there's, 1.9, and then there's two. But we all have that choice of how high are we really willing are we willing to go? Like I said, I was super ungrateful for the life that I had because I complained and I lost my leg. When I say I lost my leg, like I couldn't walk. And it humbled me because I had to depend on people. I never used to depend on anybody. I still to this day have a hard time asking for help, and that just goes back to the ego. I could do it all by myself, but it's like, why would you want to? You know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't you want help? Why wouldn't you want to listen to somebody who's already been there so they could help you step over the traps that got them?
So go back for a second. So when you talk about your leg, was it a total knee?
Yeah, it was a total knee. It was ACL, PCL, my MCL, my lateral plateau, or
Okay.
there's
And
there's 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 a list.
it was everything.
Everything. Yep.
And was that during your fighting career?
Yep. It was
Oh,
so like I said, I was very when I say ungrateful, that goes back to arrogant, cocky, my shit don't stink. I'm better than everybody. I was going around town calling everybody out, fighting the heavyweights, fighting pros. I was only amateur. I barely just started. My hands were lethal. People were scared of me. I thought I was on top. You know what I mean? And with that being said, I started veering off because I already thought that I made it because I seen a vision of me being where I wanted to be, and I let off the gas. I let off the gas because I seen it. And one of the things with me, if you see something, you are able to obtain it, but that doesn't mean you're already there. That doesn't mean that you stop putting in the work, or that doesn't mean it's going to get easier. And so I thought I was the shit. And I stopped training as hard. I started drinking more. I started partying. And what I've learned through my personal experiences is you get openings of blessings, of windows and opportunities, and if of where you're feeling good, and you're feeling good, you're healthy, your money's right, relationships right, and those are those opportunities that aren't always just there. And so when those opportunities are there and you don't take it, you don't know when that next opportunity is going to come. And I fought like hell to be at this point in my life, to be able to have a chance to show my athletic ability and my dedication and my perseverance and resilience, and also share my story of, not giving up, and how.
Do you think maybe in a little bit of a way it was, you know, your perception of success was, you were making money, you were in
Oh, yeah.
control, you had the street cred as the badass. Like, is that kind of, you just got comfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I and here this is so success. I thought I was success because I was listening to what the world portrayed as success. And when you're listening to the world, you're not listening to yourself. And everybody's success is defined differently. And if you don't know yourself, how you ever gonna be successful? And I didn't know myself, at that time. I knew a part of me. I knew the angry, the ego driven man, but there's a whole other man. There's a spirit, there's the understanding, there's the empath, empathetic man. And
But don't you think, I mean, to kind of build that armor of being this self-charger, successful, tough, all these things. I mean, you talk about not really knowing yourself. Don't you think a lot of that had to been related to just growing up in a hard life and experiencing trauma and not ever want to not letting anybody ever be able to hurt you? I mean, if we're being real, men do that. We try to put on
yeah,
this facade that we got it all figured out, and usually the guys that, put it out there that they really got it figured out probably don't.
yeah.
And I mean, I think that's kind of what you're saying. And success does mean a lot of different things. So, how did you start to kind of dig into that and head the direction, that you started to head?
So you say that one more time.
Well, just, when you start to realize that the success you
Oh,
perceive
yeah.
that you have really isn't what you want, and
Yeah.
you're not being the person that you want to be inside. How does that, how do you start to change?
For me personally, it was I for I forgot who gave me life. I forgot who gave me breath. I forgot whose world we're in. And with that being said, I treated people like shit because I had money. No one could beat me up. Uh, and like I said, I started treating. I didn't treat people the way that they should have been treated. And like I said, like with success, it's like I knew I was so successful because I was running from a calling. You know what I'm saying? I was running, and this is the calling, of of just like helping, because I I thought I was like, like the tough guy, and I didn't get help, and so I felt like I didn't want anybody else. I didn't want to help anybody else. But the thing too is, if you don't if you close off, and this is what I did, I put so much layers on because I didn't want to get hurt, but I did not realize that all those layers were also blocking all of my help. And I literally did not think there was anybody that could help me. But now looking back with this renewed mind and not this victim mentality, everybody in my life has tried to help me. But if you don't want to get better, if you don't want to get help, you're not gonna. You know what I mean? But when we have that mindset, we only hear the negative, because we're not operating in alignment.
So when you went down the road of, y- y- you know MMA and stepping into a cage, do you think that's something that you did you really have a passion to be a fighter, or was it just part of the image?
It was definitely part of the image. I was knocking a lot of people out downtown, and this guy who was coaching, he's like, "Oh." oh, you think you could fight? And I took it as like a ego challenge, like, oh yeah, this guy, you want to test me? And I fought, but it was kind of a thing to maintain the image of like, oh, I ain't scared, I ain't scared. Uh, but with that, yeah, I definitely was scared, you know? Like, I was terrified. When you see a man that's walking around all angry, that has that big he is terrified. He's terrified. I was that man, and everyone was so scared of me and this, that, but deep down inside, I was scared. And that's why I created this big image. So nobody wanted to talk to me, everyone avoided me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point that when you see that guy that's putting on the show, that's not really the guy that you need to be worried about. It's the guy that looks completely calm and
Yeah.
it doesn't look like he's too worried about anything. And I think we've got a lot of young men that listen, and I think that's such a good message. Is don't try to be something you're not. Like
Mhm.
if you truly believe in yourself as an athlete, as a person, as a son or daughter, just be who you are and you don't need to try to impress anybody or intimidate anybody because that's just not at the end of the day, that's not going to take you very far. And I think you came to that conclusion in your life. Um, do you think if you wouldn't have had the knee injury, do you think you would have continued fighting?
I think if I didn't have the knee injury, I wouldn't be here today.
Okay. And
I bel
you mean that literally.
literally, because I was, yeah, I was like, I had the victim mentality, and, I was so hurt, but I didn't realize I was hurt. I didn't wanna admit that I was hurt, and I didn't wanna stop to see where I was hurt at. You know what I mean? I felt like I had no time. But when God has a plan for you, there's no way around it. And I believe as long as each and every person that's listening believes that God has a plan for each and every one of us, or else we would not be here. But it is our job on this earth to figure out why are we here? And most people, me, like I didn't even ask that until a couple years ago. I just, like I said, I just did what everyone else was doing, what everyone, like, have the kids, have the girlfriend, get the job, work your 40 hours a week. But it's like, there's so much more in each and every one of us, and we're in a day and age now of where that awakening is becoming, more and more like options are limitless, with the resources, and especially like with the healing of the body, like there's no cap.
Yeah. Do you, and you kind of agree that maybe fighting wasn't something you were passionate about, but what did you learn from it? What did you learn from your time in the
Uh,
cage?
I learned never judge another man. Never disrespect another man. I used to be that type of guy who I'd walk in the bar and shoulder check the biggest guy, be like, "What?" Or I'd be that guy, stare you down and be like, "What?" And I went into an MMA gym and I got whooped. I was 165 pounds and I got whooped by a 130 pounder, and I couldn't even touch him, and I learned that it don't matter how tough you think you are. Like, it's almost like out of the equation. Like, there's like that. There's a difference between tough and having heart. You know what I'm saying? And in the gym, you get respect for having heart. You don't there No one likes no tough guy in a proper MMA gym. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You'll
Do
get
you
whooped.
think, mentioning heart and, I deal with athletes in every single sport. Um, you know, I personally, and I want to see what your opinion is on this, but I don't think there's any other sport out there, and when I'm referring to combat sports, boxing, MMA, whatever it may be, I've never experienced one that teaches you more about yourself.
Right.
And you want to talk about what you're made of. Like, I've never experienced in any other sport being in those situations when are you a man? Are you going to quit? That's what I've learned through that. What do you agree with that?
No, yeah, I agree, because a lot of times, we think we think we're somebody that we're not. And also, we surround our people who out of love don't tell us who we really are, and don't hold us accountable, and don't be that mirror reflection. But when you go into a gym and you're training, and you're fighting another man, there's no excuses then. You really have to dig deep, because it's in your head, you don't, for me personally, you forget that that is that it's just a sport. It's like do or die, in there. And it makes you interact with humans differently. Like you have more patience, you have more understanding. um Stuff that used to piss you off, you're not even gonna get that mad, because like you gave it all in there. And like you're not walking around, with extra baggage. You're not walking around with you extra weight, because you either left it all in there, or you got it beat off of you in there.
Yeah. So okay, so you have the knee injury, kind of ends the fight career that and whether it was or wasn't something you really wanted to do, you were good at it and you
Yeah.
were having success at it. Um I don't know what the time frame is that, from the knee injury. I know you and I met about a year ago at a boxing gym. 2 years ago?
Yep, that's almost
Wow.
3. Almost 3.
Okay. So, see, I'm just old and I forget stuff. But I remember you walking into the gym and my first thought was, "Man, I hope we're not sparring today because I'm gonna get matched up with that guy because 'cause we're about the same height." Um, but you and I met and I don't remember exactly. I know you wanted to get back into fighting. Um, so we began training together and I saw this big, strong athlete. And so right away, I had this idea of how we were going to train and how I was going to train you as a fighter. And we kind of went a different direction with it once we got into it. And, we found out that from the knee injury that your body was just not in a place to be training the way that you needed to be training to fight. And
Yeah.
I thought it was a really unique experience for me because we spent a lot of one-on-one time and really kind of evolved your training. And I kind of want to hear your take on that.
So my biggest advice, if you're lifting any type of weight, you need to do proper form. You cannot go in there trying to lift with the ego. And that's what I did. When I first started lifting, it was all about as much as you could pick up, as much as you could put down. And like I said, there was no one was around. Oh, fix your form. And even if they did, I would have been like, shut the hell up. You know what I mean? Like, don't tell me nothing. But that's because that was my mindset. And so it's when you start anything, like start with, I say, like, start with truth. Like, start with where you're at. Like, be honest with yourself. What have you been doing prior? And so I was deadlifting 640, I was benching 440, my squat was like 585 when I had my knee injury. But when I say my deadlift was 635, it was with the arched back. You know what I mean? I
Mm.
had I had no I had no bend in my back. My chest, my arms were all messed up. But like I said, I didn't realize this, because I just kept doing the same thing. And so another thing that I learned too is, when you're working out, it's not about the weights. It's not just about the weights. It's about, there's other different types of strengths. Um and you really have to learn about this stuff, because I've learned from Scott, is literally a science. And your muscles and your mind have to be connected, and you want to work certain parts together, and you don't want to work certain parts together. But
When you came into the gym, I could kind of remember, and I think I right away started putting you through a lot of mobility work. And I can remember I remember you dripping in sweat doing, we did mobility, we did some kind of force production movement, that type of stuff. And it was all stuff that you had never really experienced before. And there was for sure some frustration there. Like you were struggling with it because you were the guy that could move all the weight in the gym. And now I'm asking you to do fairly simple things and it was kicking your ass. How did that feel and kind of how did you work through that mentally?
It was the most humbling thing I've ever went through, to be able to be the guy who everyone goes to and asks what to do with lifting, to having to, be the student and then realizing like I had no idea what I was talking about. I wouldn't say I had no idea. I probably had 10%. But like I said, I had a choice. I had a choice. Am I gonna come back that next day? Am I gonna quit? Or am I gonna make excuses? Or am I gonna persevere? Like how bad do I really want it? And it was one day at a time. While I was in there, I was like, I ain't coming back. I'm not coming back. I hated it because I felt so low. I started to realize who I really was. I was this weak, broken man, and I hated it because the layers were coming off, And when I say like the layers are coming off, that means like a lot of people aren't moving properly. And so we feel bound up. And when we feel a little resistance, we stop. And that's the same thing in life. We feel a little resistance going one way and we stop because we don't think it's for us. But it's like you have to persevere and you have to like fight through it. And then it's also what type of intensity are you willing to fight through it? Are you just going to try to just get through it just to get through it because you paid through the month? Are you actually going to get through it? Are you going to get through the workout and get through to something to yourself, and figure out yourself, be like, why is this happening? What went wrong? And what I realized was like you helped me realize like our body carries so much.
Yeah.
And I had zero idea about that. Zero idea. I thought it was just my body, like I had no, and I didn't even know. I thought I was big. I didn't think I was supposed to move like that. I thought just because I was big, I had limitations. But then there it goes, is like it got hard and I didn't want to ask for help. And so I just stayed with what I knew. But I wanted so much more, but I wasn't willing to go out with what I knew. With the box outside I knew, I wanted more, but I wasn't willing to step outside the box.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of days where, uh, uh,
Oh, I
you
was
know,
crying some days.
yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, right away, I didn't know you. There was, you could feel tension during the workouts to the point to where I didn't know whether you were going to knock me out or hug me. Like seriously, like, I mean, there
Yeah.
was, and I just, I do what I did. I just kept pushing and kept pushing you out of your comfort zone. And, it turned into a cool thing because then, you and I developed a relationship beyond the training aspect and you started to unwind more than just your physical body. We started to have great conversations about life and developing as a human being. One of the funniest things, and I don't know if you remember this, but you, I mean, this is probably maybe a few weeks, maybe a month or two in, and you were kind of just laughing. And I was like, and you were shaking your head, and I'm like, Joe, what's up, man? And you said, man, I can't believe this shit. And I'm like, what? What's going on? He's like, man, if you would have told me I was getting advice from some middle aged white dude, I would have never believed
Yeah.
it. And, I tell that as a joke, and you remember that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I tell that as a joke, but when you said that, I knew the door was open. I knew you were listening to me and that you trusted me. That you
Mhm.
trusted what we were doing was working and showing you a different way that wasn't just about, like you said, moving all the weight in the gym. And I think that's so relevant to so many athletes out there because everybody just thinks as long as you're lifting weights, you're training.
Yeah.
And training has got to be about the individual. And, that was such a cool thing. And I laugh about that a lot. That's one of the funniest things I've ever heard in the gym.
Hey, because, like with me in my past, one of my biggest fears was a middle-aged white man. Because even though I was a grown man, even though I'm big and I was, because I stopped developing my spirit as that little boy, and there's so many men that are walking around as little boys, and that's okay. It's literally okay. But like I said, what you did for me, it was partial physical, but it was more mental and spiritual, because, and that's why I say is like, God put me in that position, but it's like you have to want it, and I wanted to get better, not only my body, but my mental. And and by me holding on to that anger and me judging white men that I don't even know based off of a couple who did me wrong was limiting my success, was limiting my reality. And what you taught me, we taught each other is like, man, you never judge a book by its cover, and there's good people and there's bad people. It has nothing to do with the color. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
and I think, it's also important. There was a side of it for me as well that could have been like, hey, I'm not going to take the time to work with this guy. He's got an attitude problem. He's a street guy. Like I could have easily seen that as a reality, but I have always I don't care what I hear about people.
mm,
I base everything on how that human being treats me. And from day one, you were always respectful, and we had a good rapport. We talked, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it has nothing to do with skin color. It's being real with a human being, and caring about people and trying to help other people find their best version of themselves.
with what I've learned though is, with if you have that perception, and there's a lot of, I see it all over. We live in Rapid City, South Dakota, and it's like we have this perception based off of past hurt, and that could and that's such broadly spoken, but we limit ourselves because we're scared and we can't admit it. We want more, but our more is is on the other side of what we're scared of. You see what I'm saying? And it's like, how could you want more, and how could you expect more when you're sitting there scared? Take some steps, and God is going to meet you. He's gonna meet you where you're supposed to be at. And one thing that I really want to improvise on this, and I've taken my kids to Scott, and anybody that knows me, my kids are very, very, very special to me. And I trust Scott with my children. And Scott isn't just a guy that's gonna give you the sheet and, oh, do this, do this, do this. He cares about every single person he works with. You invest, and that's another thing that I didn't see. I didn't know like other people cared like that. I thought, like I said, like my vision was, my thinking was closed, my vision was closed. But yeah, I felt you care about me, and that was weird for me. I'm like, why you care? What? Let's just do this workout. But you weren't just doing the workout, you were correcting me when I was wrong, and you were pushing me. And that's like the thing too, is even when I would get frustrated, and I know you've seen it, like you did not let up. And I got the utmost respect for you for that.
And I think, it's also with everybody that I work out or work with, every athlete, I want to know them. I want to know them as a human being. I want to know what's going on in their life. And, throughout all of our workouts, we were always talking. We were always
Yeah.
talking, and I was always trying to learn about you, asking you questions, and sometimes asking you maybe uncomfortable questions, maybe questions that I didn't know if you'd want to answer. But, and I think my coaching staff, I've tried to teach them that how important it is to get to know our athletes, and so I really appreciate you saying that, um, because it is something that I work very hard on, and I think it's what separates us. That people are they're people to us before they're athletes, and we try to build those relationships. So now we after however long you got your body right, and I'm not ever going to say you got your mind right, or any of us have our mind right, because this is a
Yeah.
process.
Yes, sir.
This is our life, and but what does success look like now for Joe Horst?
So I wanna note on this first. So when I had the incident that happened to my knee, the doctors told me I would never walk again. And so because when I hurt my knee, I didn't get surgery. I worked on it for 6 months because I just started my company, and I thought I had to make a lot of money, this and that. Uh, so there was so much scar tissue. The surgery was only supposed to take 2.5 hours, but it ended up taking 7.5 hours. And when I woke up, they told me, they're like, yeah, we almost like cut your leg off because there was so much scar tissue, and we were just scraping, scraping, scraping. And so I want that to be said, is don't ever let anybody tell you what your limits are, because that's speculation, and nobody's done until God says so, until he takes his spirit out of you, and that's the breath. Even if your heart stops, you know what I mean? Like, you come back. And so with that, I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna walk again." Hey, that's the wrong guy to tell me that. And then I started walking. I started jogging, and this is a year two process, And then, and that's when I went to you. But that's the thing, is I could have got scared, and I could have been like, I'm good with walking. You know what I mean? I'm good with walking, but I kept listening to that voice, and I want everything that God wants for me. I don't want to leave anything on the table in my life. And that's what success is. So each and every day I wake up to be better than I was. And I've always had the drive, I've always had the spirit, but I never had the mind, and I never thought that I had resources and support. And so now that I'm learning and I'm embodying this help, is I want people never to give up on themselves. I want people to step outside themselves. I want people to, find new versions of themselves. And that's success for me, is helping people go through and get through things that I thought I was never going to get through. Because there's been so many times I thought I was it, just waking up in so much pain, so much pain. But then if you take those couple steps, it's a little relief. There's a little relief. And one thing, I have an addicted personality. Be addicted to feeling good naturally. Be addicted to something that there's no cap on, and that's what I'm addicted to now.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking back over the years, y- you know, there had to been times where you were done, like where you wanted to give up. What do you think? What kept you going?
Hey, that voice in my head, also, I've said a lot. I talked a lot of shit, and I'm not ever gonna walk around with my head down. For the past couple years, I wouldn't say walking around moping around, but I kept my mouth shut just because of, I was in the healing transition. But yeah, just I lost the train of thought.
So you just think you've always relied on that voice in your head.
Well, it's because I don't wanna live with regrets, and there's been times where I'm like, "I'm done, I'm done." Like, nothing's gonna get me up, and yeah, I am done for 1 or 2 days, and then I'm back out there, and like I said, there's just something in me that will not quit.
Yeah,
And but you gotta, like, that's like I said, I really believe that's in each and every one of us, but it might take a traumatic event, for that version of you to come out.
that's a good point. So where are you going over the next 5 years?
So right now I'm playing defensive end for the Rapid City War Eagles. And I've never played football before, but it's like I said, I wanna do as much as I can. And that's always something that, I dreamed of. I used to not even want to watch football because I couldn't do it. Um, but yeah, so I'm playing football. I want to start helping people, on their healing journey, because I didn't even know that I needed healing, because the surface level, but my actions and my character showed that I needed healing. Um, and so I just, yeah, I want to be the outlet for people who need healing, um who need direction in life. I just want to give back.
Yeah. Well, I hope you can find a platform to do that because I know there's a lot of young kids that you know, they may give some have a hard life. Some it might look like they have it all figured out and they're miserable.
Uh-huh.
And so I think the more people out there like yourself who you've lived a tough life and you're coming out the other side, and I say that because none of us are home free. You
Right.
know, but I think people like you that have been through tough times and are still moving forward and doing it with a good attitude and doing it with gratitude. Those are the type of people that need to be helping our young people. And, so I know you're a creative guy. I hope you can find some ways that you can get involved in different organizations or schools or whatever it may be. Because I think your message is awesome. I think the fact, like you alluded to, I mean, the fact that you're still here, things
Right.
could have gone much, much different. And so I really hope you kind of double down on that and you find a way to get in front of young people because I think I think you could really change some lives. Um, and then anybody that is 6'4", 235 pounds, that looks like an NFL linebacker should probably be on the football field. So I think that's really cool that you're doing that and you're not passing up opportunities and you're living life and I'm very blessed that you and I cross paths. Because
Likewise.
I've learned a lot from you as well, and I'm proud to call you a friend, and I'm proud of the work that you've done to become a real man. I mean, and that's really what it is. Um, but I think real is the key word there because
Yeah.
you're right. Guys they don't show emotion, and they try to cover it up by being a badass, and it's not real.
No,
And
that time has passed.
yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that you're still young enough that you've got most of your life in front of you to experience all the good things and like you said, to continue to help people. So Joe, I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, that's just real stuff that we talked about. Like I said, it takes a real man to be able to talk about life like that. And so, yeah, I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have to get a workout in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah, no problem.